So the other day, I was talking to an executive, and he had discovered that the culture of his team had become one of, if somebody doesn't do something right, that we're going to write you up. He was so frustrated, and so we talked a little bit about, how did that happen and things like that. But the reality is, what he wanted to know was, how do I fix it? And so here's a couple of things that when we find that a culture has become one of the manager doesn't like the results that the employee is getting, and so immediately the manager supervisor says, I'm going to write you up on whatever the form is that your company has. Here's a couple of things to help shift that around. So first and foremost, one of the things that I would offer is that people have to get into the mindset that when somebody screws up, that's a learning experience, right? We got to get to that versus when somebody screws up, somebody doesn't meet our expectation, that they need to be punished. People do not like to be punished, and it becomes a place where the environment isn't psychologically safe. We've got to get it so that people want to try things, they want to get things done, their intentions are good. So let's start with making sure we set up those managers and supervisors to believe that people's intentions are good, and that people ultimately want to do the right thing, and that if they don't do the right thing, that this isn't about punishment, it is, what did we learn about it? Okay, so that's one of the first and foremost things that we need to make sure is happening as a manager, leaders, or supervisors. But then as a manager, leader, supervisor, what we need to do is make sure that we're setting those expectations. Set the expectations of timelines, the quality level, the frequency, the production rates, all the things that people are saying, this is what good looks like, and get people to understand what those things are. And remember, telling is not training. They need to have an opportunity to look at and have reminders of what those things are. Second thing, first set expectation. Second thing is remove all barriers. So the two most important things that we have to do as managers and supervisors and leaders is set those expectations and remove the barriers. Barriers can be maybe the equipment isn't right, or maybe the person doesn't have the right information, or maybe the person has the perception that the way they're supposed to do it is a certain way, but they need more information. There's a barrier involved with that. There are other kinds of barriers too, where if an employee notices that there's a problem or an issue that they believe that management or the supervisor won't do anything about it, so they don't bring up the problem in the first place, that's a barrier. In our roles as leaders, it's to take away the barriers that other people have. We don't always know what those barriers are, but that is really our responsibility. Helping people solve problems at the place where the problem exists and remove the barriers that they don't have control over. And the third thing, let's make success visible. Most of us either watch or have played all kinds of sports. And in those sporting events, we get to see what the score is. We get to see if we've made fouls. We get to see if we've scored. We get to see if there's a penalty. We get to see all the different statistics. And we know if we're doing good by the score because it's visible. Most of us don't show how the score is progressing or how we're doing in relationship to what good looks like, because there's nothing visible that we share with others that say, hey, we're doing good, we're on the right track, or if we're not quite on the right track, that we can make some adjustments. So let's review these things again. Let's make sure that those managers and supervisors understand that if somebody doesn't meet an expectation, that their responsibility is to help that person become better and not punish, to find a way for that person to behave the way that they need to. Second thing is to make sure that those managers, supervisors are setting expectations, clear expectations of what good looks like. Third, make sure that those managers and supervisors are removing barriers. If there are barriers that are physical, let's remove those. If there are barriers that may be the way people think, let's remove those. If there are barriers in the process, let's remove those. But let's get rid of those barriers because people ultimately want to be successful. And the last thing, make sure that when we are succeeding, that we can show people our success. It's a visible thing. If we're struggling, that they can see where we're struggling and that we can make some adjustments. Again, removing the barriers. Make sure that those things that we're supposed to be doing are visible and that we can celebrate them along the way. You know, when you look at those 4 things, it sounds simple. It's not necessarily easy. But as managers and supervisors of others, let's do our best at making sure that every day the people that work with us can feel the success that we all want them to feel. So what are you going to do?